First Maccabees, first book of the Maccabees, and Maccabees, it means hammers. Okay, that's not Matthias' real last name. It's Ben Israel. But Maccabees means that he had 5 sons, and they were all hammers for Israel. And it happened after that, Alexander, that's Alexander the Greek, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, the king of the Persians and Medes. This is history. That he reigned in the stead the first over Greece, and made many wars and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth, and went through to the ends of the earth, and took spoils of many nations. So much that the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up. He got proud. And he gathered a mighty strong host, and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. And after these things, he fell sick. A lot of people say he was a homosexual. Could have caught some disease. Who knows? He died at 32. And after these things, he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Although he did have kids, he had children, but first priority was men. He loved men. Wherefore he called his servants such as were honorable, and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servant bare rule everyone in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves, so did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. Now, I just told you that he was a homosexual. What do you think his 4 generals were? They had to be homosexuals too. All right, don't look at homosexuals being weak. Some of these dudes could fight. Switchblade homosexuals. So these homosexuals multiply evils all over the earth. Never happened until this time. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage of Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen. Let's go make a covenant with these homosexuals that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. If you have a book of Josephus, put this in your notes. Josephus, chapter 12, section 5, verse 3. And that's the antiquity of the Jews. All right? So this is real history. There's real history on this. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen. So where did sports come from? Sports came from the Greeks. Israel didn't invent sports. The Greeks invented it. Okay? And we're going to read up on this right now to show you that all the fashion statements, Nike and Under Armour and Adidas and these tight sweats, all that came from the Greeks. Our people wearing these tight sweats and things like that from the Greeks. Verse, let's see, where do I want to go? So we're just going to read to verse 14. It says, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem. They put a 24-hour fitness in Jerusalem. According to the customs of the heathen. That's bad. But let's go to 2 Maccabees. Let's go to the second book. Hold that verse. Don't move. But go to 2 Maccabees, because it's going to elaborate more about this exercise. And we're going to see how they got down. 2 Maccabees, chapter 4, verse 12. 2 Maccabees, chapter 4, verse 12. All right. And we're going to let's read down to verse 17. And it says, "For he built gladly a place of exercise under the tower itself, and brought the chief young men under his subjection, and made them wear a hat." Now, this is where the baseball cap come from. All right. You see the baseball hat with New York Giants or the New York Yankees and all the different fashion statement hats. This is where they came from, the Greeks. Now, such was the height of Greek fashion. Look at that. It was the height of Greek fashions. Nike. Nike comes from the Greeks, too. I don't know if y'all know about that one. And a trace of heathenish manners through the exceeding profaneness of Jason, that ungodly wretch, and no high priest. So we had a high priest who was no good. He followed the ways of the Greeks. So can you imagine what he was teaching in the synagogue? He's probably sound like these Christian churches today. They ain't teaching no laws. Just believe in Yahweh and do whatever you feel. Just do a sacrifice if you do something. Bring an animal. We'll sacrifice it and you're okay. All right. Verse 14. That the priest had no courage to serve any more at the altar. Look at that. But despising the temple and neglecting the sacrifices, hasten to be partakers of the unlawful allowance in the place of exercise. Look at that. They were partakers in this unlawful act of gymnasium sports. After the game of discus called them forth. You see that in the Olympics. Men throwing the discus. Not saddened by the honors of their fathers, but liking the glory of the Grecians best of all, by reason whereof sore calamity came upon them, for they had them to be their enemies and avengers, whose custom they followed so earnestly, and unto whom they desired to be like in all things. For it is not a light thing to do wickedly against the laws of the Most High, but the time following shall declare these things. See, the sports things, man, and think about how it's so drenched in our nation today. You got the Olympics, you got basketball, football, baseball, hockey. That pretty much governs. I mean, when COVID-19 hit, nobody could participate in sports. This place was just desolate. People they couldn't even talk about sports to each other. Remember, they were showing reruns on TV. They were showing old championships, old Super Bowls. So it's the same thing. I want to show you who the image they were trying to be like. Go down to verse 19 in that chapter. 2 Maccabees 4:19. It says, "This ungracious Jason sent special messengers from Jerusalem, who were Antiochus, to carry 300 drachmas, that's money, of silver to the sacrifice of Hercules." All these young men wanted to be like Hercules.
Your problem is, it don't work out. Got exercise. Look at me. That's all muscle.
Oh,
You fat, I'm muscle.
oh, look at my little Bill. He's a little Hercules. Show me muscle again. Oh, Hercules, Hercules, Hercules,
Once you work out,
Hercules, Hercules.
your metabolism stop speed up.
Which even the bearers thereof thought fit not to bestow upon the sacrifice, because it was not convenient, but to be reserved for other charges. See that? This money then, in regard of the sender, was appointed to Hercules' sacrifice, but because of the bearers thereof, it was employed to the making of galleys. There it is. Sports has a god. What's that god? False god? Hercules. It's never changed. Let's go back to 1 Maccabees, verse 15. 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 15. We've been kind of embellished in this land, in this way of doing things, that we've gotten so accustomed to being like this world. We don't even realize it. Some of us work in that world. So, we're stuck in it, so to speak, until we can get ourselves out of it. 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 15. "And made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief. Now, when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt, that he might have the dominion of 2 realms, whereof he entered into Egypt with a great multitude, with cars, I say cars because that's what you understand, chariots, and elephants, and horsemen, and a great navy, and made war against Ptolemy, king of Egypt. Let me see. Let's jump over to verse 25. So the priests were all corrupted. They allowed the Greeks into their temple without a fight. Without a fight! These priests allowed the heathen in there, and they destroyed it. Let's drop down to verse 25. First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 25. I'm cherry picking through this chapter so you can get some understanding kind of quickly. First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 25, it says, Therefore there were great mournings in Israel, in every place where they were, so that the princes and elders mourned the virgins, and young men were made feeble, and the beauty of women were changed. Why? Because the women in those days were good, wholesome women until the Greeks came in. Then what happened to the women? They became harlots, right? They started using them. I mean, look at this world today. Look at how they use commercials with women. You know, every nationality are on these makeup commercials or on these the videos, and so they changed the beauty of what the women were supposed to be like, which were a godly way. A good way of seeing how they were, if you read the book of Judith and you see how she was, her hair was covered, she wore a long dress, but when she got dressed up, everybody, they were like, wow, they couldn't believe how beautiful she was. You know, she was a drop-dead gorgeous lady. But she did everything in honor for the Most High. Let's look at Deuteronomy 23 and 17. Deuteronomy 23 and 17. There shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel. I just told you what Alexander the Greek was and his generals. There were sodomites. What happened to our young men? Why did they get into sports? Do you know when they perform in sports, they had to be butt naked? They didn't wear no clothes. Everything was exposed. That's why they didn't want them to circumcise themselves, so they all could be in uniform as the Greeks. Okay, let's go to Leviticus chapter 19 and 29. If you look at gymnasiums on universities and colleges, and you see the symbols on them, you'll see naked men, naked athletes on these gyms, because that's how the Greeks were. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 29. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 29. Do not prostitute thy daughter to cause her to be a whore, lest the land fall to whoredom. Israel had fallen to whoredom. That's why Yahushua called them adulterers and adulteresses. And the land become full of wickedness. See that? When the Greeks came, that's what happened to our people. Let's go back to First Maccabees, chapter 1, and let's read verse 27. First Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 27. Every bridegroom took up lamentation. Why? Because they couldn't find women that they were used to seeing as being women of Israel. They saw women who were dressing like the Greeks. This is true. Every bridegroom took up lamentation. You know what lamentation means? It means to mourn. They couldn't find a decent woman. Look at what the women were like. And she that sat in the marriage chamber was in heaviness. Why? Because she couldn't find a husband. You see that going on today. The land also was moved for the inhabitants thereof, and all the house of Jacob was covered with confusion, just like today. Sad, but the Most High is showing us. That's why we got to go over this stuff. And after 2 years fully expired, the king sent his chief collector of tribute unto the cities of Judah, who came unto Jerusalem with a great multitude, and spoke peaceable words unto them. Look at Joe Biden and Clinton and Obama. They spoke peaceable words. But all was deceit. For when they had given him credence, he fell suddenly upon the city and smite it very sore, and destroyed much people of Israel. How did he destroy them? Did he kill them? No, he was destroying them by their thoughts, by their customs. He was taking everything away from them. Just like Obama, what is he known for? Gay marriages. Verse 31. And when he had taken the spoils of the city, he set it on fire and pulled down the houses and walls thereof on every side. But the women and children took they captive, kidnapped them, and possessed the cattle, and took all their tax money. Cattle, the way of life. See that? Let's drop down to verse 37. Thus they shed innocent blood on every side of the sanctuary and defiled it, insomuch that the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them. Whereupon the city was made an habitation of strangers, and became strange to those that were born in her, and her own children left her. That's why when we read the book of Mark in the Gospels, Yahushua was talking to Edomites. He was talking to everybody. It was just a few Israelites in there. He didn't expose the true nature of his sermon until he got in close quarters. That was for the children of Israel. See? Verse 39, her sanctuary was laid waste like a wilderness. Her feast was turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into reproach, her honor into contempt. As had been her glory, so was her dishonor increased, and her excellency was turned into mourning. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people. Sounds like Genesis chapter 11, when Nimrod made all people be of one people. And everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. This is when we lost our laws. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion, and sacrificed unto idols, and profaned the Sabbath. This is why the New Testament don't go into the Sabbath and all that stuff. All right? This is why. That's why you have to read our history. This is confusion. This was mass hysteria. Let's go to 2 Maccabees. 2 Maccabees chapter 6. That's why when Christians talk about things, it's not that we don't love them, but we love those who keep the Most High's commandments. We're trying to show them his commandments, right? They don't know what they're talking about. That's why Yahushua said to the Pharisees, it says, when you look at me, hey, I've been telling you who I am. Y'all can't see who I'm talking about. But they was all in the world, as we read in the book of Maccabees, how the priests gave up the laws and stopped doing sacrifices and started doing things for filthy lucre. 2 Maccabees chapter 6, verse 1. 2 Maccabees chapter 6, verse 1. And let's read to verse 12. And this is giving you an understanding of how the young men were getting caved in by these different mindsets. Look at what they use. It says, not long after this, the king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Jews. Why did he send an old man? Because our young men respected old men. Now they don't. Not long after this, the king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Jews to depart from the laws of their fathers and not to live after the laws of the Most High. See that? And to pollute also the temple in Jerusalem, and to call it the temple of Jupiter, Olympius, Zeus, and that in Gerizim, the Jupiter, the defender of strangers, as they did desire that dwelt in the place. That's why when you go over to Rome and you see the statues in the museum, a lot of these statues, they say, oh, that's Paul, and that's Peter, and that's Adam, and that's Abel. No, these are gods of the Greeks that they kept and changed the names. That's why they don't look like us. The coming in of this mischief was sore and grievous to the people, for the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the Gentiles, who dallied with harlots and had to do with women within the circuit of the holy places. They was taking the young women in there and having sex with them in our sanctuaries. The priests just let them go in there. And besides that, brought in things that were not lawful. The altar also was filled with profane things which the law forbiddeth. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient feasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. And in the day of the king's birth, every month they were brought by bitter constraints to eat of the sacrifices. And when the feast of Bacchus was kept, the Jews were compelled to go in procession to Bacchus carrying ivy. That's your Christmas, Bacchus. See it, carrying ivy? Don't you see that? Those wreaths that be around the doors? Bacchus is Christmas. Moreover, there went out a decree to the neighbor cities of the heathen by the suggestion of Ptolemy against the Jews, that they should observe the same fashions and be partakers of their sacrifices. And whosoever would not conform themselves to the manners of the Gentiles should be put to death. Then might a man have seen the present misery. But there were two, we'll stop right there. But as you can see, drop down to 12. Verse 12. Now I beseech those that read this book that they be not discouraged for these calamities, but that they judge those punishments not to be for destruction, but for a chastening of our nation. The Most High did this so we will wake up, because we were so lost, we had forgot the law. We were just giving up the Most High's laws like it wasn't nothing, out of fear. We just stopped keeping them. We stopped keeping the Sabbath days. People will start to question you. Why are you always in your house on the spot? How come you don't come out? How come you don't go nowhere? They start questioning us. And then they go report, send an evil report to the king and to the officers, and they come get you and kill you. Question you. Crazy. We're getting back to those times. Look at Psalms 119, verse 71. And for those of you who don't know, Psalms 119 gives every chapter in Hebrew alphabet. Aleph, Bet, Vet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Set, Yuv, Yad, Kar, Zamet, Lamet, Nun. I'm just going off memory. But if you look at that, you see the Hebrew alphabet throughout Psalms 119. It's the biggest chapter in the Bible. Psalms 119, verse 71. And this is the chapter Teth. Psalms 119, verse 71. It is good for me that I have been afflicted, that I might learn thy statutes. That's why the Most High had us go through this. He said, it's good for me that I've been afflicted, that I might learn the Most High statutes. First Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 44. First Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 44. We'll finish this chapter. I'm going to end it with chapter 2. First Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 44. And we're still skipping around here in this chapter. So we're not going to read the entirety of the chapter. First Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 44. For the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, that they should follow the strange laws of the land, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days, and pollute the sanctuary and holy people, set up altars in groves, and chapel idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh. Y'all know what that is? Pork. And unclean beasts. You know how we have KFC, and you see the bucket sitting on top of KFC's restaurant? Well, the Greeks set up a pig on top of the sanctuary. They cut off the head of a pig and they placed it on top of the sanctuary. You can read that in the book of Josephus. They just totally contaminated the whole place. That's how they know the pork is not good for us. It says that, verse 48, that they should also leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation. Now you know why we were plague-ridden when Yahushua came. To the end they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. And whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said, he should die. Drop down to 52. Then many of the people were gathered unto them, to wit, everyone that forsook the law. And so they committed evils in the land, and drove the Israelites into secret places, even wheresoever they could flee for succor. They were all in the caves. That's why we find manuscripts today in where? In the caves. We watch the Discovery channels and things like that. They keep finding all these manuscripts in the caves because our people fled in there. And drove Israelites into secret places, even wheresoever they could flee for succor. Now the 15th day of the month, Caslu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar. What's that? They put that pork head on top of that temple, and builded idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side, and burnt incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets. And when they had burnt, and this wasn't no frankincense and myrrh. This is all types of crazy incense, blackberry incense, and you name it. Verse 56, and when they had rent in pieces the books of the law, which they found, they burnt them with fire. So they found our scriptures and burned them up, so we wouldn't remember. And wheresoever was found with any the book of the testament, the book of the covenant, or if any consented to the law, the king's commandment was that they should be put him to death. Thus did they by their authority unto the Israelites every month, to as many as were found in the cities. Imagine that. They come knocking on your door every month, seeing if you got books of the scriptures, searching your house. They probably were setting people up too. They didn't like take a scripture out their pocket and throw it on the bed or something. Verse 59. Now the 25th day of the month they did sacrifice upon the idol altar, which was upon the altar of the Most High. At which time, according to the commandment, they put to death certain women. They had caused their children to be circumcised. So these women were tough. And they hanged the infants about their necks and rifled their houses. You know what rifle mean? It's kind of like during the insurrection days here in America when we had our own cities, you know, like Wall Street, Black Wall Street with Native Americans and blacks. When they wanted our houses, they would line up at night with their guns. They would count to 10 and tell us to get out of our houses. We're going to actually count to 100. By the time we reach 100, we ain't out the house. They was going to riddle it with bullets. And a lot of times they didn't even make it to 100 before they started doing it. So this is what it means by rifling their houses. They didn't have guns, but they had other things. And slew them that had circumcised them. Howbeit many in Israel were fully resolved and confirmed themselves not to eat any unclean things. Wherefore they chose rather to die, that they might not be defiled with meats. Man, our people are strong. And that they might not profane the holy covenant. So then they died. And there was very great wrath upon Israel. See? So there were sisters during that time who were sincere, just like Queen Esther and Queen Judith. Go back to Judith. Let me show you how she was. Judith chapter 8, started 5. It says, and she made, because her husband had got killed or he died, so she was mourning. But it says in verse 5, and she made her a tent upon the top of her house, and put on sackcloth upon her loins, and wore her widow's apparel. And she fasted all the days of her widowhood, save the eves of the Sabbaths, and the Sabbaths, and the eves of the new moons, and the new moons, and the feast and solemn days of the house of Israel. She was also of a goodly countenance, and very beautiful to behold. And her husband, Manasseh, y'all know Manasseh, the prayer of Manasseh, had left her gold and silver and men servants, and maidservants, and cattle, and lands, and she remained upon them. And there was none that gave her an ill word, for she feared the Most High greatly. See that? Queen Judith was no joke. She was so beautiful when there was a war going on. She stepped out in her garments and her hair down, and everybody stopped fighting. Scripture said everybody just stopped. They stopped fighting. And she went to go talk to the enemy's king. All right? So our sisters, they were bad, man. Don't underestimate the sisters of Israel. Let's go back to 1 Maccabees chapter 2. 1 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 1. We're about to bring out the avenger of Israel here. It says, in those days arose Matthias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Joreb, from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin. And he had 5 sons, Johanan, called Caddis, Simeon, called Thassi, Judas, who was called Maccabees, Eleazar, who called Avaran, and Jonathan, whose surname was Apis. And when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, woe is me! Wherefore was I born to see this misery of my people, and of the holy city, and to dwell there when it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, and the sanctuary into the hand of the strangers. Her temple has become as a man without glory. Drop down to verse 17. Then answered the king's officers and said to Matthias on this wise, thou art a ruler and an honorable and great man in this city, and strengthened with sons and brethren. Now therefore come thou first and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen have done, yea, and the men of Judah also, and such as remain in Jerusalem. So shalt thou and thy house be in the number of the king's friends. And thou and thy children shall be honored with silver and gold and many rewards. See how they try to pacify us? That's how they do Al Sharpton and Reverend Jackson, and they give them all these rewards that we don't see. Then Matthias answered and spoke with a loud voice, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him, and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers, and give consent to his commandments, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers. The Most High forbid that we should forsake the law and the ordinances. We will not hearken to the king's words, to go from our religion, either on the right hand or the left. And when he had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar which was at Modin, according to the king's commandment. Which then, when Matthias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled, neither could he forbear to show his anger according to judgment. Wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar. Now this was the Israelite that he slew. Also the king's commissioner, who compelled men to sacrifice, he killed at that time, and the altar he pulled down. Thus dealt he zealously for the law of the Most High, like as Phinehas did unto Zambri the son of Shalom. And Matthias cried throughout the city with a loud voice, saying, whosoever is zealous of the law and maintaineth the covenant, let him follow me. So he and his sons fled into the mountains and left all that ever they had in the city. So they were all zealous for the law. They were honorable men that believe in the Most High laws. They did not give up. Right? You don't see too many men like that today. They're all in the world. Even the ones that you think in the Christian churches don't want to keep the Most High's laws. Verse 40, And one of them said to another, if we all do as our brethren have done and fight not for our lives and laws against the heathen, they will now quickly root us out of the earth. And what time, therefore, they decree, saying, whosoever shall come to make battle with us on the Sabbath day, we will fight against him. Neither will we die all as our brethren that were murdered in their secret place. Because our people, they believe you wasn't supposed to fight on the Sabbath. But remember what Yahushua said, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath day. They're defending the Most High. So they went to war on the Sabbath day to fight for the Most High. Then came there unto him a company of Assyrians, who were mighty men of Israel, even all such as were voluntarily devoted unto the law. Also all they that fled for persecution joined themselves unto them, and were a stay unto them. So they joined their forces, and smite sinful men in their anger, and wicked men in their wrath. But the rest fled to the heathen for succor. Then Matthias and his friends went round about and pulled down the altars. So you got to see, there's a bit of Yahushua in this. They're fighting on the Sabbath day. The Most High, Yahushua, that was his biggest thing. It's like you could do good on the Sabbath. Brothers have a problem with understanding that. Doing good is taking care of your people. Even the Pharisees, Yahushua challenged the Pharisees, saying, how can you judge me on the Sabbath day, or judge righteously on the Sabbath day when I'm helping people? And you're accusing me, but we see you circumcising little boys on the Sabbath day. But you want to accuse me. So see, you could do good on the Sabbath. Verse 61. And thus consider ye throughout all ages that none that put their trust in him shall be overcome. Fear not then the words of a sinful man, for his glory shall be dung and worms. Today he shall be lifted up, and tomorrow he shall not be found, because he is returned into his dust, and his thought is come to nothing. Wherefore, ye, my sons, be valiant, and show yourselves men in the behalf of the law, for by it shall ye obtain glory. See that? These young men got to follow the Most High, man. He said, be men. Don't be no simps. You know, show yourselves to be worthy of the Most High. Psalms 119, verse 97. Psalms 119, verse 97. It reads, how love I thy law, it is my meditation all the day, that through the commandments has made me wiser than mine enemies, for they are ever with me. I have more understanding than them all my teachers, for thy testimonies are my meditation. I understand more than the ancients, because I keep thy precepts. I refrain my feet from every evil way, that I may keep thy word. I have not departed from thy judgments, for thou hast taught me. How sweet are thy words unto my taste, yea, sweeter than honey to my mouth. Through thy precepts I get understanding. Therefore I hate every false way. So you can hate every false way. Did Yahushua hate every false way? Did he speak on it? Did the disciples speak like this? Was it always all lovey-dovey? He hated every false way. You should hate every false way. People don't even like to hear that word hate. Oh, that's a powerful word. Don't use that word. The Most High said it. He said it. He even hated Esau. Esau was perverse. He hated Esau because of his perverseness and his ways. And he used Esau to overcome Israel, as we can see. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 15. You got to remember what he says about how we're going to judge the world. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 15, and it says, I'll start at 14. It says, but the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of the Most High. You ain't studying this word, you don't have the Spirit of the Most High. This is some other spirit. It says, for they are foolishness unto him. neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. But he that is spiritual, we know what spiritual is, keeping the laws. The law is spiritual. It says, but he that is spiritual judgeth all things. Yet he himself is judged of no man. Why? Because they can't judge you because they don't know the laws. If you're keeping the laws perfectly, you're doing righteousness. Especially if you understand faith. How many people can actually, people don't even like to talk about the Most High. How are they going to know about the commandments? When you say, I got to get home, I got to keep this feast day, they should chime in, but they don't know what you're talking about. All right? The Most High judge of all things through the Spirit. You should already know what spiritualness is. Look at Matthew chapter 7 and 22. Just about done, y'all. We'll save the rest for another Shabbat. Matthew 7 and 22. Matthew 7 and 22, and it reads, many will say to me in that day, Hamashiach, Hamashiach, have we not prophesied in thy name? Haven't we not talked about you in our huge congregation? And in thy name have cast out devils? We saved many people when we told them to come up to the altar. It says, have the Lord Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, your spiritual Lord and Savior. And they put that a little anointing oil on your forehead. But did they really know him? And in thy name done many wonderful works. What wonderful works? We wasn't keeping the laws. Verse 23. And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work evil. He hated evil. Yahushua hates evil too. See that? How are you to be kept blameless? By keeping the laws. By keeping the ceremonial, the moral, the dietary, sacrificial, and the judgment laws, which was a covenant or a covenant of commandments to Israel. We all have our accountability to the Most High in gladness. Psalms 119, verse 9. Psalms 119, verse 9. Wherewithal shall a young man cleanse his way? How you going to tell these young boys how to get right? Or these young men how to get right? Or these old men how to get right? It says, by taking heed thereto according to thy word. What's the word? Verse 10. With my whole heart have I sought thee. Oh, let me not wander from thy commandments. Ceremonial, moral, dietary, sacrificial, and judgmental. Thy word have I hid in mine heart, that I might not sin against thee. Blessed art thou, O power. Teach me thy statutes. That's everything in a nutshell. Psalms 118, verse 1 through 4. Psalms 118, 1 through 4. Give thanks unto the Most High, for he is good, because his mercy endure forever. Let Israel now say that his mercy endure forever. Let the house of Aaron now say that his mercy endure forever. Let them now that fear the Most High say that his mercy endure forever. That's what it's about. Keep his laws and you'll get mercy. It's all about the merciful. Most High, a wink at you. And with that, I'm going to end this class. Know that we as Israel have to understand what mercy is. And we must not lack in believing the Father. And we must keep his commandments through Yahushua. Are there any questions, statements, or comments for this class?
took you from the pastures and from following the sheep to be prince over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and have destroyed all the enemies in your path. I will make you a great name among the great ones of the earth. I will assign a place for my people in Israel. There I will plant them, and they shall dwell in their own land.